All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our, let's call it, Elder Scrolls post hoc analysis and breakdown. That sounds nice and official.
Concise.
Yeah, yeah, very, very much professional, professional like pseudoscience. You know,
That's right.
like if you're ever gonna have like a panel on something, right? You go out of your way to add as many um as many like qualifying descriptors as possible. So
Exactly.
back when I was a Rooster Teeth, back when they existed, um, they had a bit once where they said that they had some kind of panel on like video games. I think is what it was. Just like yeah, like what do we like about video games, um, and like essentially it boiled down to them being like, let's make this as like stupidly long as possible. So instead of just calling this like a talk on games, they called it
Right.
Alternative Careers in Gaming, the Science of Play Redefined as Art via Content Creation in the Ongoing and Evolving Paradigm of the Post-Network Media Environment. What does it mean to you? Featuring Rooster Teeth. Um,
Featuring.
so yeah,
There we
anyway,
go.
this is just going to be sort of a podcast episode thing, sort of a one-off that we are going to um, hang on a second here. I don't
Right.
think my
No.
mic just is to being captured. confirm. You are and have been capturing my
You,
audio through
Alan,
Discord.
as an audio mixer. Yep. And
Okay.
desktop audio is muted because I also have Spotify playing along with like three other sound things.
Fair
So
enough. Fair enough. I mean, hey, put on your Jeremy Soule playlist. I know you love listening to it anyway. If it puts you in the right headspace for it, then fuck it. Sounds
I
good to
put on
me.
epic themes. I put on epic themes. So it went through. It just played Secunda, and now it's doing some Hans Zimmer piece. I don't know what movie it's from.
Hmm. I don't know, but Hans Zimmer kind of all
King
sounds the
Arthur.
same. If you if you listen to like King Arthur compared to the Christopher Nolan Batman themes, you start to realize like, oh, this sounds exactly the same. And it's funny because was it Hans Zimmer who did Pirates of the Caribbean? Um,
I thought that was Elfman, but maybe it was Zimmer. I'll look it up.
who did Pirates of the Caribbean composer?
It was Hans Zimmer. Yep.
Yeah, Hans Zimmer. Yeah, because Hans Zimmer.
It was musical
I
producer technically.
right, but like you can tell that it's his music because, or like his sort of impetus for the music
Yep.
because if you compare it to Gladiator, which he also worked on, you realize, oh, the theme for Gladiator sounds almost exactly the same as the theme for Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yep.
Huh? That's funny. And it's sort of like there was really like no conflict here. There was like nothing that legally stopped you from doing this. Like,
Right.
okay, you know what? Hey, it's a great theme, and it's definitely better remembered for Pirates of the Caribbean. So screw it. Like, I guess why? I mean, I guess they're making a Gladiator 2 now. That's gonna suck though. Nobody's ever gonna remember anything about Gladiator 2. Um, but yeah, like
Yeah. Maybe we'll find out.
I guess sometimes reusing old work works. If you can get away
Yeah.
with
I
it,
mean.
screw it.
Yeah.
If
Exactly.
it's functional, if you're half-assing something, not so much. But anyway, um, let's reuse some of our old work and talk about sort of just the Elder Scrolls as a video game series. Not discussing Skyrim, not discussing Elder Scrolls Online, and obviously not discussing Oblivion because we haven't played that yet. Also not discussed are Redguard, Battlespire, and any other sort of Elder Scrolls spinoff, because we're really only focusing on the main games in the series. So,
Yes.
having said all that, um, let's just start from the beginning. What do we? Let's start off with like, what are our sort of just like off the bat sort of key things that we think of or want to say about the first game in the series, Elder Scrolls Arena?
I mean, for me, Elder Scrolls Arena was a tough start. Just because I guess it was such a blast from the past, kind of like, very little quality of life improvements, because it's, basically one of the first RPGs that's actually, a video game. Kind of, again, ported over as a tabletop, from tabletop logic. So for me there, just trying to understand, like, oh, cool, there's a dice roll on everything. And so it kind of sucks at times, just because, again, it's porting over that same logic, but it's blanket sweeping it, because it's one of the first ones to do it. So they're not like, oh yeah, you know what sucks as a player? Having a roll to hit, just to hit itself, not even the amount of damage, but rolling to hit and then rolling for damage at the same time is a little annoying. I just swung at this, bad guy 20 times and missed every single time. It seems kind of stupid, just from again, a logistical standpoint of like, I'm swinging at the other, the bad guy. I see the bad guys in front of me. I should theoretically hit them. It's fine if I hit them for 0, but I should be hitting them. And just stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, like maybe maybe it plays like an animation of like them blocking, or if they could figure out a way to play an animation of like them dodging or something. But there's sort of a disconnect happening there where
Yeah.
I'm hitting somebody, but I'm not actually hitting them. So yeah,
Exactly.
that's definitely jarring. Um, Maybe, probably more so to somebody like us who is approaching these games based on our past experience, where um, we've got a long history of comparatively modern games compared to this, where the
Yeah.
paradigm has shifted, and what has become standard, what has become acceptable, what has become fun is very different than what was standard back in the 90s.
30 years ago
Yeah, exactly.
for that game.
Um, and it changed pretty quickly after that game had come out. Now, one thing that I do want to do, at least for Arena and for Daggerfall, is I do kind of want to compare them to Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, because by the time this comes out, Fallout 2 will have ended several weeks ago. And so yeah, we've played fully through. I mean, not 100% completed, but we've beaten the game for both Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 at this point, as well as played through as much of the first 3 Elder Scrolls games as we're really going to for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Asterisk, but we can discuss that asterisk at a later time.
I am playing 2 again. Sorry, pal.
Well, we'll talk about this at a later time. I have plans for.
Let's take this offline.
Yeah, we'll worry about that later. Yeah, it's very interesting because essentially both of these games started. Both of these franchises, I should say, started off with people in a media entertainment company specifically video game developer publishers, um, who got into the industry that they got into because they're giant nerds.
Yep.
And I suppose it's rather interesting to date this. We're recording this in November of 2024, when the paradigm has shifted quite a bit on that in the contemporary industry. So if you're watching this, 5-10 years after the fact, and things have shifted back or shifted in a third direction, and you're just thinking like, what the hell are you talking about? Wow. Let's just say that things are not looking good at this moment in the gaming industry. But we're not focused on that right now. Um, we're sort of more focused on kind of digging up the history. So, yeah, what you've got is people in Interplay, namely Tim Kaine, Jason Anderson, and Leonard Boyarsky, were playing Dungeons and Dragons, and other tabletop role-playing games that were kind of based off of the same system as Dungeons and Dragons.
Hmm.
Turn-based dice rolling for determining everything.
Yeah.
And my understanding, if I'm correct about this, is that it was much the same at Bethesda, where people at Bethesda had been playing games, tabletop games, board games, whatever, and then they had kind of decided to create their own world. And whereas Fallout, um, Fallout, I think, was a lot more derivative because they were originally, I think, wanting to make Wasteland 2, and then
Hmm.
lost rights for that, or maybe never got the rights in the first place. I'm a little fuzzy on the details there. Uh, and, they kind of went back and forth on a few things. They were going to use a system called GURPS, and then they lost the rights to that, and so they instead made Special. Um, and Fallout 2 was kind of I'm sorry, not Fallout 2. Fallout 1 was kind of a miracle of accidents that caused everything to kind of come together in many ways just the perfect way.
Hmm.
If you look at the story with Elder Scrolls, it's a little bit different. With Elder Scrolls, they kind of, from the beginning, had a more cohesive plan, at least for the first game. So with Elder
Yeah.
Scrolls, they created their own world. They knew they were going to do that from the beginning. They made it sort of roughly based off of Dungeons and Dragons, and they took a lot of inspiration in terms of gameplay mechanics for that. But there wasn't sort of the same kind of back and forth of like, oh, we want to use this. Well, we've lost the rights to that. Oh, we want to, do this thing. Instead, and it also was not kind of just dumped on the shoulders of like one or two people. Instead, it was more like everybody at the company kind of came together and they really pooled ideas, and like they would have up a whiteboard and be like, hey, there's all these cities here, give us names for them. um,
Yeah.
they would have like gods and stuff, and they would just kind of take any kind of idea from anybody at the company, and in a lot of ways I think that proved to be ultimately better, to create a better franchise
Yeah.
than what Fallout created. It's also very interesting to note that Fallout tried to more, in my opinion, more directly translate the tabletop experience from a board game to a CRPG.
Yeah.
Whereas Elder Scrolls kind of tried to halfway translate it from, okay, like, this is instead of putting the board game into the computer, in my opinion, they tried to more put your imagination into the
Into the
computer.
computer.
And
Yeah.
so, when you're playing, I don't know if you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons or any other tabletop RPG.
I have not. I have not. I've
Okay,
only witnessed it a little, but I've never actually played myself.
got it. But you're sort of familiar with how it works. Like, you're looking at like little plastic characters on a board, and you've got like a map or something. You like physically move them around, and the dungeon master kind of describes what's happening, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so a lot of really what goes on in D&D, a lot of what makes it interesting is your own imagination, what you're picturing in your head. Sure, there's other human interaction that makes it very worthwhile, and I've done some of that myself, and I understand how much fun it can be. But if it's not, if you kind of take away the your imagination part of it, and you just kind of boil it down, if you get like overly reductive with it. Um,
Hmm.
then you kind of find yourself looking at something that feels very mundane, very boring. But then you add in the imagination part back to it, and you realize, like, oh, this transforms it hugely. It makes an enormous difference.
Yeah.
And this becomes something wildly entertaining, and something that you can kind of really uh, reflect on. Something that, like, it can have real material, well, not material, incorporeal value to you.
Right.
Um, and so I find it interesting thinking about the differences between Fallout as a franchise, and I promise we're not going to talk about Fallout the entire time. Um,
All good.
that's a discussion for another podcast that we'll do, where Fallout, like I said, kind of tries to more directly port the board game into the computer. And Elder Scrolls, from the very beginning, kind of tries to bring imagination to life. Limited though it is, of course, because, I mean, it's a medium. It's never going to be a perfect recreation of what your imagination would be. But yeah,
Hmm.
so from the very beginning, when you kind of wake up and you're in that dungeon underground. Well, actually, I guess it's not necessarily underground. You're in that dungeon wherever you are,
It's
and
basically a
you,
prison.
yeah, exactly. You're in a prison. You wake up and you're like, oh, okay. Rhea Silmaine comes along and she kind of tells me what's going on, and like, this is sort of my impetus. Like, right off the bat, I've been made an enemy of the state here. So
Right.
that's, I don't really have a choice in the matter. I'm kind of compelled to move forward and help. Um, which is, not, I'm not saying that in a negative way, but just like right off the bat, like, you are the player, and you are everything that you do in the game. You're kind of experiencing through the lens of, like, this is me in another world. Um, and you don't get that exact same feeling in Fallout. In Fallout, it's more like, that's my character over there that I can see in front of me. and I can
Yeah.
control him and I can tell him what to do, but like he's not me.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean, like, just does that all make sense? Did I just go on some like long, insane rant for no reason, or like, do you have anything you want to add to
No,
that or
makes
disagree?
total sense for sure. Yeah.
Um, was that
Um,
kind of sorry? Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say no. Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. Was that kind of like? Did you get a kind of a similar feeling to that when you were playing each game respectively? Because this was kind of a realization that hit me when we were going through Fallout 2, right? So, like, this was not something that I came up with when I originally played Fallout years ago. This was not something that I came up with when we were going through any of the Elder Scrolls games at any point, really. But it was just kind of like when I
Trilogy,
thought
you
about
still there?
Fallout 2, and I was like, because I was thinking about like the isometric
Uh,
perspective that they
think
keep at all
there it
times.
is.
Sorry, what'd you say?
I lost you for a second.
Oh, well, yeah, I was just saying, like, this only really occurred to me, like, when I was going through Fallout 2 with you. So, like,
Yeah.
like this was like something that took years, sort of, for me to really realize or develop any kind of thoughts on. So, yeah, just like I was wondering if like you had any kind of similar ideas as you were going through any of these games, or if you had completely different ideas. Like, that's totally. I want to hear that too.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, with going through these games, I don't really have the experience of, tabletop playing at all, right? So, um, for me, it's more of, I have the experience of having played, my first real computer RPG was Skyrim. So that's kind of what I base it off of. And I'm sure plenty of people are going to be like, "You're not a real player," but at the same time, like, yeah, but it's what got me into it. So like, step off. Um,
Right.
but again, using that as kind of my reference frame, like I can see the enjoyment of the first couple of games, and obviously Fallout tossed in there with it. But um, like with Arena, I enjoyed Arena probably throughout. After I got out of the first dungeon, obviously that was kind of a pain in the ass, but it's looking back on it, it is actually, even having read about it more, it's known for being a pain in the ass to actually get out of the first dungeon. So at
Yeah.
least it wasn't like a isolated experience. Like I'm reading here that the the main developer of the lead designer of Morrowind, it took him 20 times to get out of the first dungeon of Arena. Like, all right, well, so it is, it is tough. So,
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was
but yeah,
amazing. I'm sorry. Keep going. Keep
no,
going.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was kind of amazing to me because I going into both Arena and Daggerfall, I had seen a let's play of each of those games, and I wouldn't say I paid like super close attention, and that was on purpose because I was kind of like, I want to experience this for myself. So like, I want to watch this and sort of get like little inklings, bits and pieces here and there. But I don't want to. I don't want to spoil the story really for myself or anything. I don't want to kind of ruin like any surprises or anything that the game kind of has for me waiting around the corner. Um, so I did watch some let's plays, just enough to sort of get like a very very basic idea of each game, sort of like what it feels like to play them, etc. Nothing really more than that. Um, and what I remember was that the people that I watched spent like forever in the first dungeon, and I remember I got out of the first dungeon, I want to say within like 10, 20 minutes, something like that. Like it wasn't, it took me maybe like 2 or 3 lives to be able to do that. And I by far did not have like a perfect grasp of, how the game worked or anything, but it was like just enough for me to be able to sort of like be moderately comfortable.
Right.
Um, I say moderately comfortable mostly because, like, if you remember, the control scheme for that game was terrible. It was so awful. It was actually like painful with the way the keys were laid out because I had to like twist my arm in like such an uncomfortable way that like after playing for half an hour, I was like, my wrist is actually starting to hurt from this. Like, this is not fun. To
Right.
the point that, like, I think it was by our second session, we were like, we have to download a mod that is going to fix this control scheme. And thank God we did that, because we ended
Yes.
up playing that game. How long did we play Arena for? Let's see. But we played it for like a couple dozen hours, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was, there we go, Elder Scrolls Arena. 29 videos. Wow. Yeah, let's see. 2, 3.5, 7.5. Episode 3 was really long. Um, it looks like we played for about 20 hours or so, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the
Um,
first couple episodes were long as hell.
oh yeah, because that's when we were still kind of trying to keep the sort of stream format, and then I was like, we're pre-recording these anyway. We might as well just cut these off after like 20-ish minutes, and then
Yep.
and that saved an ass load of work for me editing wise. Also, Arena was what pushed me to finally get voice meter set up and finally start splitting out my audio so that like I didn't have my microphone and the game audio and Discord all mixed into one track, and I can actually adjust the levels of each of those things independently when I'm editing these videos.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm very grateful to Arena for that. Because that I think has made a world of difference for some Twitch VODs that are, I think, subpar, but have turned into decent YouTube videos. Not that anybody watches those anyway. Oh well.
It's
Um,
fine.
so yeah, but I was very surprised that I got out of the first dungeon so quickly, and then I remember watching back the first episode of Arena, and I'm like out and I'm exploring, and I'm like, whoa, this stuff is so cool. You've got like 90s pixel snow falling down, and we got all these people walking around in this place. This bar is in the middle of a hedge maze for some reason. That's really dumb, but it's really cool to be out here. And you're like, I'm in hell! I'm stuck in the first dungeon, help me! And I felt
Yup.
really bad, but I was like, we've never done something like that was the first time we did two independent single player experiences. And like we didn't know how to really work it together or anything, and like it was kind of just it was strange, I gotta say.
Hmm.
uh but it was fun. And I do think we enjoyed Arena. I think I did, at least.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
I will say, so I think we've kind of talked a lot about Arena's strengths, and other things to say about Arena that are great. Um, it For a game that came out in 1994, absolutely wild how big the cities were, how much dialogue they were able to put everywhere, all over the place. Like, I'm amazed that that was able to fit on, I assume, a floppy disk. Absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Major props to Bethesda for that. Um, but the cons. I think we. Is there anything else positive you want to mention about Arena?
Um, yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you had 2.5D sprites. That was pretty innovative for the time. I would say, and just, again, for at least what I've played, that's similar to the era.
Yeah, yeah. Moving. Okay, I do also want to point this out. Moving around the entire world in a first-person sort of 3D perspective, that's wild. For 1994, absolutely incredible that they were able to pull that off, and it does really speak to uh, what they were compared to the rest of the gaming industry, where they were sort of on the bleeding edge of a new paradigm for video games, where a lot of stuff. I mean, there had been some stuff that was 3D before that, sure, and they're even like fully 3D, sure, and
Mm-hmm.
I want to say like there had been some stuff that was first person 3D before that.
Mm-hmm.
In particular, um, let me see, when did Doom come out? Um. Oh yeah. Doom had come out the year before in 1993, and
Mm-hmm.
Wolfenstein. I believe Wolfenstein actually. Oh fuck! I just lost my internet for a second. Oh, please come back.
I hear
Okay.
you again.
Okay. Okay. Good. Oh, this computer. Oh, this computer. Yeah. So the original. Wow. Okay, the original Wolfenstein had actually come out in 1981, which is way earlier than that. I was thinking like 1986. Was it? Uh. Oh, that's cool. Castle Wolfenstein was initially conceptualized by Warner after he saw the Guns of Navarone. Huh, that's cool. Um.
Oh yeah, insufficient travel times to finish quests in Arena was absolutely so true. That's why I never
Um.
did like I tried never to never do a single timed quest because that did suck. I'm reading the reception of the game.
Oh, okay. I was like, you sound like you're reading something else. Are you live streaming this or something? Like, what's going on? Yeah, no, that makes sense. Um, so yeah, I guess there was more lead up time than I had initially thought for first person point of view 3D games. But even still, like to pull off something like that for an RPG, I think was unheard of at the time. Um,
Yeah.
I certainly I can't think of anything else that came even close to it. Not that I'm, some aficionado of everything that came out in the 90s. In fact, I know very few things that came out in the 90s, so maybe I should shut my mouth, but I won't. Um, but yeah, it's incredible, in my opinion, what Bethesda managed to pull off with that. Um, does it hold up today? Fuck no, it does not. Not even sort of. Um, but is it a lot more? approachable, and is it a much easier pill to swallow to go back and play Arena than I thought it would be? Absolutely. Oh yeah, to the point that I was genuinely able to have fun with that game, and there were not always, but sometimes um, I was actually looking forward to playing Arena, uh, which is kind of not what I was expecting. I was expecting to have to, hold my nose and just like dive through it and like swim to the end as fast as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, um, I have some nice thoughts for Arena. On the
Yeah,
negative,
I'd agree.
though, where do we want to start with Arena?
Um, it felt a little tough to figure out where to go at times.
Yeah,
I will
it
say I didn't
definitely.
like the timing of some quests. Just the quest being timed in general was just kind of annoying because you didn't really know
Yeah,
what time, like how time passed. Other than like, yeah, all right, cool. So I see it took me 4 days to get to this place, but how am I supposed to find this, person?
right, and so sort of the one kind of saving grace for uh, the timed quests in Arena is that those timed quests were all generally like side quests, I think. I
Yeah,
don't
it's
think
exactly.
that.
Which is why I was like, I didn't like them. I just avoided them.
Right, yeah, and so that's still not great, but it's like way better than if like because I don't think any of the main quests were like you have this deadline, you meet this or go fuck yourself. Um, so yeah, I was gratified, I guess, to see that. And again, I kind of had the same thing that you did, where I saw some of the side quests in Arena, and I was like, "What's the point?
Yep.
Why bother going through any of these?" Except for like, there was a part of me that wanted to do some of the side quests to get like some of the unique items in Arena, like the Agma Infinium, Oriel's Bow, the Lord's Mail, because I know that those show up in some subsequent Elder Scrolls games. And I was really interested to like find those items and be like, what's the story behind this? Like, you have to go through like a whole Daedric quest in Skyrim in order to get something like the Wabbajack or
Yep.
Spellbreaker from Periite. And yeah, and so like having known about sort of the future and like some of the lore implications for certain items like the Staff of Magnus or Oriel's Bow. Um, yeah, I was really interested to see kind of what these looked like in their first appearance, and it was extremely lackluster. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just a very boring fetch quest essentially for each one of them, and it's just like, hey, we picked a random dungeon out of a hat. Go through here. It looks, you know, exactly the same as everywhere else.
Yeah.
Go have fun digging through this, and then now you get your item at the end that doesn't really do anything too interesting. We're not going to give you any interesting lore behind it or anything. So yeah, unfortunately, yeah, the side quests were not at all interesting for me. After doing a couple of them, I think I was just like, all right, I don't really care about these. I'm just gonna do the main quest because the side
Yep.
quests don't seem to be kind of offering me much of anything.
Yeah.
Um, Also,
Yeah, and
the sorry, go ahead.
and that's exactly what like it was like. It leveled up the CRPG game at the time, but playing it back, side quests are just they're not fun, right? They're not fun because there's stuff that has a higher standard now, and like you said, why would I do a goofy quest for something that doesn't really give me anything in this very old game, versus like you said, the Wabbajack is a great example of like it's about the story that you're doing, and yeah, you want the Wabbajack because it's intriguing, but the story itself behind it as well is also very fun. So
Right.
that didn't translate in their side quests, unfortunately, and that's again because quality of life of the newer games have trumped it now. It's good to pay homage to the game because it did level it up, so to speak. But unfortunately, you know, and fortunately, I would say, CRPGs have really launched in the last 30 years since the release of Arena, making it very obsolete. It's like listening to a rock song from the 40s, which is great but very simplistic, versus now it's like you can appreciate it, but you know that there's something else out there that's way more intriguing.
Well, sure. And well, to be fair to music, because I almost listen exclusively to things that came out before the mid '80s. There's tons of old music. There's tons of ancient music that is leagues above what their successors have created. Um, and there's tons and tons of stuff from like a very early age that is uh, better. I just think objectively better than what most people, at least, have created. This is true for tools also, like hand tools. Tons of hand tools from like more than 100 years ago are proving to be way better than a lot of cheap crap that gets sold today. There are movies from the 40s and the 50s that are just so much better than movies today. Uh, there are ancient Greek myths that tell stories better than like a lot of modern authors do today. Uh, sort of the like timeless classics. So it's not necessarily. I don't think it's fair to say that it's necessarily an issue of, at least not completely, um, of just the earlier stuff not having had the benefit of forebears to kind of make the mistakes for them and blaze a trail.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I do think that if you look at a good example, I think, is like a Dungeons and Dragons game where you've got a human DM. Obviously, of course, the sort of limiting factor there in translating from tabletop to CRPG is that in tabletop, you've got a human, an actual person who you can interact with and who you can sort of bounce ideas off of, and they can be a lot more adaptable and a lot more flexible, and they can do things that a computer just is not capable of, or at least certainly was not 30 years ago. I would say I don't think a computer is capable of it today either, but
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the next like 10 years or something we're going to see something like that uh, develop where a computer really can be on par with a human for something like a dungeon master role,
Right.
designing and kind of creating things on the fly for you to interact with. And um,
Perhaps.
we're sort of seeing the beginnings of that now, I think, but there are also a lot of flaws with it now that uh, make a computer still inferior. Anyway, the point being that yes, it's tough to try to create content that is as flexible and as compelling in a computer game as it would be in a tabletop RPG, because you don't have the benefit of the DM who um, can be flexible and respond and uh, be creative. So, yeah, yes, there are limitations, but at the same time, it's possible to write something a little more interesting, or at least a little bit more varied than, hey, I heard about this artifact that's over in this dungeon. Go clear the dungeon, and then you'll find that artifact. There, you can tell me about like some war or something that happened, or some battle that has caused alliances to shift, and because this person didn't trust that person, they decided to move their assets around, and while they were doing that, a thief found out about what they were doing and took advantage of the momentary lapse in security and was able to, something like that. um,
Yeah.
it really, it doesn't have to be too in depth, but especially if you're going to make some unique items in your game that are going to be sort of the major draw for uh, like the sort of major content aside from just doing the main quest. It probably behooves you to um, put in some more effort, I think. Is that, you think that's fair? Am I off base? Am I out of
Yeah.
touch?
No, I think it's kind of fair. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay. Um, Other criticisms. The game was very buggy. It was, and not the kind of bugs that I tolerate or sometimes even appreciate in a good game, particularly a good Bethesda game. Um, no, this game was riddled with bugs that uh, got in the way of us playing, that absolutely broke the balance, bugs that threatened to end our experience early, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, how many times did you have to restart Arena because of the the speedrun glitch that you accidentally abused, and then that locked you into being unable to progress the game through normal means?
uh, I want to say it was three times. Three? I think it was three. Three or four.
Yeah, and those 3 or 4 times, that was like, it wasn't like 20 minutes in we realized, oh, okay, we got to
No, it was
restart.
hours in.
No, it was, yeah, it was like tens of hours into the game. It was rough. I
Yeah.
I genuinely felt bad for you when I found out that that had happened. Uh, and that's another reason that I didn't bring up too much the fact that you kind of glitched your, or well, cheated your character to level
We
like
just modded it,
50 or
basically.
something, or whatever it was that you did that got yourself like 5,000 health. Um,
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a DOS game and it has hexadecimal code in it, so I just got a hex editor, and
Editor.
decided I guess I'll learn what I can change in what spots, and finally figured out, oh, I can change my level this way and my gold this way. So it
Hmm.
basically just like, all right, well, at least I can do the main quest now, and I
Yeah,
can speed run to it so I can catch up to you.
right, right. Yeah, and full honesty, like I've done stuff like that actually for Kerbal Space Program, And I did a little bit for Minecraft at one point. Um, yeah, in Kerbal Space Program, if you open up the save files, it's all just a .text file. So you can look up like, oh, I've got a spacecraft called like the Flying Jebediah, and then you literally just Control F the Flying Jebediah. Oh, okay, here's the spacecraft, and below it is like a whole bunch of data that says like it's here, it's moving this fast in this direction, it's got this much fuel, the engines have this kind of specific impulse, and just like it just it's just like a list of data that describes the various characteristics of it. Which was really cool to find because I was like, oh, cool, I can just like edit this to like give myself more fuel because I didn't design this rocket very well. Um, so yeah, it's I've done stuff like that too, and especially in your case, yeah. To be clear, I try not to do stuff like that anymore. But particularly in your case, it's like, yeah, this game has really screwed me, so I'm going to go out of my way to just minimize how much I have to invest in uh, getting back to where I was. Um, so yeah, I'll also say that a lot of the world building in Arena is half baked, and to be honest, half baked is putting it generously. Um, I would probably say it's more like 1/10 baked.
Yep.
It's not very well thought out. It's not very well planned out. Um, Going into Daggerfall, I think tons of stuff already is getting retconned. Um, a lot more solid ideas are kind of being put forth in Daggerfall. Um, and yeah, um, there's a lot of stuff that it happens or is said in Arena that later games are kind of like, this doesn't really jive very well with like what we're doing now, and it also it's just like it's very generic. It's not well written in a vacuum. So like let's just get rid of that and let's like pretend that never happened, and then we'll kind of try to fix things moving forward and try to present like a more polished, I guess, product
Yeah.
moving forward in terms of the lore. Um, so yeah, Arena, entertaining, kind of the bastard child of the Elder Scrolls family, though. Do you think that's fair to say?
I mean, it was the first one, so I wouldn't say that. I would just say, like,
I mean, it's ironic, but I think it's true.
I mean, I guess so. If you're gonna use in the true sense, the word bastard, yeah, this kind of happened.
Yeah, and like, look, I appreciate the game for creating the franchise and just starting everything off. Um, but yeah, it's kind of retroactively been gutted. Um, any thoughts about Jagar Tharn, the main villain of Arena?
um, I mean, he was, scary, I guess. I would say he's a fairly generic, bad guy in, today's modern standards of like, all right, yeah, he did this thing to try and take over Tamriel, and now we got to stop him. Like it's pretty cut and dry in that regard, right? Like you have your main antagonist, and there's really not much nuance to him. At least
Yeah,
that's my kind of feeling about him.
yeah, I would say my impression of Jagar Tharn is that he's basically Sauron, but like 1,000 times less intimidating. Um, Not a bad villain, I would say, not by any stretch of the
No.
imagination. But Jagar Tharn is probably just like, he's okay. He's unremarkable. Like perfectly serviceable as a villain.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing that I think about that I'm like, hold on, we need to have this for him, or we need him to not have this that he does have. There's nothing
Right.
like that. There's a whole lot that I think you could do to make him more interesting. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, um, he's a bad villain by any stretch of the imagination. Um,
No.
and especially, when I think about some modern uh, movies and some modern video games, um, there are much, much more poorly written villains that I can think of, some of whom we are going to come across. But I'm not going to spoil them for you. Um,
That's fair. That's fair.
yeah, and the other thing that I have to say about Arena is that there's a whole lot of it that feels very sort of cheap 90s generic fantasy. That I think they didn't really start moving away from that until they got to Morrowind. But yeah, I think that's enough said about Arena. I give it one thumbs up.
Yeah.
It
Same.
gets an A for effort. I recommend anybody watching this go give it a look. Go give it a look. Give it a try. It's an interesting time. Don't I would say you don't really feel like you need to do anything other than the main quest. And to be honest, with how repetitive the main quest is, don't necessarily feel like you have to beat the game even. But it's fine. Um, it's interesting to take a look at it for yourself.
Yeah. Exactly.
Now, Daggerfall. Let's start with the positives for Daggerfall.
It was short. I enjoyed that it was short.
Well, our experience of it was short. That's definitely
Exactly.
true.
It was perfect.
So, Daggerfall, we played that for about 8 hours. Well, so I think Daggerfall made some improvements in terms of less rigid class systems. If you picked a certain class that didn't disqualify you from being able to use magic, for example, if you or like certain weapons or armor types, as far as I'm aware anyway. Pretty sure. I don't know. Maybe I couldn't. I don't know. But I think like it was a lot more open at the very least. In Arena, if you picked a mage class, it was like you cannot wear armor at all. You are not able to wear armor.
Yep.
You can't hold a sword. You can't use a bow. You can't do this, that, the other thing. If you picked an archer, then it's like, well, okay, you can wear armor, but not this armor, this armor, this armor, this armor. You can't use
Yeah,
a
you can only wear
sword.
light.
Yeah, like you can't use all these different kinds of weapons. Like if you want to use these, get fucked. Also, can't use any magic at all.
Nope.
And so Daggerfall kind of changed that approach. It took a softer approach. And instead of locking you into one very specific play style from the very beginning, it kind of gave you a lot more tools that you could use as any kind of character. And it would be like, well, if you're this particular class, you can specialize more in these tools. You can um, you can do uh, more with like this kind of weapon than other classes would be able to, right?
Right.
Um, and so I appreciate that. Like, that makes sense. So yeah, great, fantastic. Also, Daggerfall. Daggerfall did improve on the visuals between
Yeah,
Arena and
it did.
Daggerfall. Huge improvement, massive. Well done, Bethesda. Especially only like 2 years later, I think. Absolutely wild that they pulled that off. Two thumbs up for that. Um, the last good thing I think I have to say about Daggerfall. Well, okay, no, I have two good things to say about Daggerfall from this point. Number one is that Daggerfall introduces the skill leveling system, where Arena just sort of went with the more standard, like Dungeons and Dragons style, like you gain 500 XP. Oh, you've leveled up to level 2. Um,
Yeah.
the way that Daggerfall did it was actually really good, in my opinion. And it wasn't perfect yet, but it paved the way towards the future, towards what we eventually have in Skyrim, where it's just like, hey, you use this skill, great. Your skills have increased this many times. Now you're at the next level, and
Right.
getting to the next level gives you a perk and some like extra bonuses. Daggerfall. So in the 8 hours that we were playing Daggerfall, I think I leveled up once, if that. I'm not sure I ever leveled up.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't think I ever leveled up.
yeah. Um, and oh, you know what? A little half positive point here. Daggerfall had nudity in it. That was interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I'm calling it a half positive point because, like, I don't know if that's really something that we want to celebrate exactly, but it's kind of neat. Um, so yeah. Uh, and then the last thing that I want to say positive about Daggerfall is that they really expanded the world building in Daggerfall.
Yeah, they did.
Cities are a lot bigger. Um, there's a lot
It's not just
more.
cookie cutter anymore, which is
Yeah,
good.
there's a lot more named NPCs who have sort of more specific um, writing for them. Like they've got backstories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a ton of books that were introduced in Daggerfall where you get to read about the wider world and like what all of the various things look like. The different political movements. This count hates this count. These guys are racist against these other guys. You get joke books. I think you picked up a book at one point that was like Khajiit jokes or jokes about Khajiits.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I did.
yeah, there's just like a ton and a ton of world building that really started with Daggerfall, and I do appreciate Daggerfall for that. I didn't feel like we really had the time to read a bunch of books and stuff like that. So
No.
we've kind of skipped over a lot of the books in the Elder Scrolls series, which is kind of a shame. Um, but yeah, so we've got. One other thing that I want to mention is like the books in so you've got like a particular book that tells a story about like a historical event, and it's
Right.
different in one province versus another.
Yep.
And that is like such a brilliant touch, and that's an attention to detail thing that is absolutely uh, it's insane, honestly, to try to make sure that you've got that for the hundreds and hundreds of books that are
Yep.
present throughout your game. Like, oh my god, it's so nuts.
There was a lot of very cool world building that way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the ambition, and the effort is definitely there.
Absolutely.
Um, but, 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 uh, this is the game I think where so I don't know if you've heard of this before, Galen, but there's a very common phrase that's used to describe the Elder Scrolls series:
Okay.
a mile wide and an inch deep. And I think that's actually really unfair to use to describe Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it fits pretty well for Daggerfall.
I mean, it was the
Because,
biggest map ever for like 20
mhm.
years.
Oh yeah, yeah, they did. They went out of their way to try to make everything feel sort of true to scale.
Yeah.
Um, and
To almost a fault, honestly. I mean, it was praised
absolutely
for what
to
it
a
was,
fault.
but
I
I
well, I
just
think I think it
going
was
back to play it
absolutely a
sucks.
detriment. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think it was a mistake for them to do that, um, because what ended up happening was, and when I say true to scale, I don't just mean in terms of like the physical size of the map. I mean
Right.
in the way that you could interact with everything in the game. They
Yeah.
attempted to try to make everything true to scale. You could go to a bank and get a loan. You could buy a house. You could, join this guild, that guild, whatever. You could do missions for the guild. If people
Yep.
didn't like you enough, they wouldn't let you join the guild.
Yep.
If you commit a crime and got arrested, then you would actually have a trial. You could climb up walls. These are all very, very interesting and compelling mechanics on paper.
Yeah.
But the way that it all works out is actually kind of painfully frustrating, I think, in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
take for example, you've got various speechcraft skills. You've got like Giantish and Daedric, and like you can actually speak different languages. But your character never has an opportunity to speak somebody and choose to say something in Daedric, for example. Knowing that, like, oh, hey, we can use this as a secret code or something. Your character does not have the ability to walk up to a giant and be like, "Hello, brother. I'd like to trade with you. I've got some pelts that I would sell you. Will you give me some meat so that I can, eat on my
Eat
way?
food.
Yeah, eat some food and be able to be on my way." Um, it's it's all dice rolls from top to bottom.
Yeah.
But before we go on from this, do you have anything else nice that you want to say about Daggerfall?
Um, I appreciate it for what it was at the time. It was definitely an improvement on the first game, in a lot of ways. I mean, reading here, it was, kind of rated a flawed masterpiece in a number of reviews. So I can appreciate what it was, but we'll obviously get into why I didn't enjoy it and the
Yeah.
detrimental, the parts we didn't like.
Yeah. So I think, again, agree with the first part of that. It was an improvement in a lot of ways.
Yep.
And I think it was a real big step back in a lot of others. Um, it was brutally difficult. Everything is dice rolls from top to bottom. This is where
Yes.
I don't know if it just felt more excusable in Arena, or maybe I just didn't really notice because I was using magic most of the time, and magic was just like, yeah, you cast it, it hits, that does damage.
Yeah, for me it was miserable as an archer.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, but yeah, the dice roll mechanics of I swing my sword, I can clearly see it pass through somebody, and it does nothing.
Yep.
Ugh, so annoying, so goddamn annoying. Um, I yeah, I stayed frustrated with Daggerfall for its difficulty. God, the first dungeon was like a nightmare to try to get through.
Yep. It really
That was
was
brutal.
brutal.
Coming across the first skeleton was like, oh, this is a chore already.
Yep.
Uh, and did not like the vampire playstyle. It was
Mm-hmm.
okay, but I was interested in kind of exploring, like, what's it going to be like to play as a vampire. And it turned out that in all of the consequential ways, it was stupidly overpowered. And then in all of the inconsequential ways, it gave me a lot of hurdles to try to get over, and actually ended up becoming very annoying. And so I ended up not really enjoying the vampire aspect so much. I don't know if I would have seen it through. I like to think I probably would have, but if we had kept playing, I think there's a good chance that it would have been like, I don't want to be a vampire anymore. Screw this. Um, but yeah, there was there was like some sort of interesting stuff to trying to be a vampire in that game. Um, the the climbing was frustrating because, again, that's a sort of dice roll thing, and it was very hard to get to work reliably and to get it to stop working when you didn't want to climb. Um, what else? Oh, I didn't really expound on this very well before, but all of the like language skills, Giantish, Daedric, etc., um, those all get used and level up passively, which means that like there's no real player agency there. It's kind of just something that like happens. It's like the weather. Imagine if Skyrim classified rain as a skill. Like, oh,
Right.
great. Like, okay, yeah, I feel really invested in this. Like, that's awesome, cool, wonderful. Um, yeah, did not really appreciate that. Also, let's talk about Daggerfall's approach to quest design, and particularly the main quest. So yeah, Daggerfall's approach to um, the main quest, and pretty much all quest design, was to try to be as realistic about it as possible. As realistic as a 90s game could get. And that would be like, hey, you've got this person over here that has some job for you. They want something, or they want you to cast a spell, or they want you to defend them, or they want you to steal this item for somebody else, or something like that. Um, and it was onerous to be given a task like that And this task is
Yep.
the gateway to
At a minimum,
further content. Yeah, like
Trilogy?
you. No, I'm here.
There you are.
It was like this is a prerequisite to other things that you want to do in the game. Like, this isn't something that you really want to be doing of itself, but if you want to do other things like the main quest, you have to do something like this first. Either this or like a carbon copy of it somewhere else. And so it's like, okay, that's not great. And then on top of that, they add a time limit to it. Hey, and to be fair, it was usually a fairly generous time limit. If you went directly there and then came directly back, it was usually like, okay, I've got plenty of time left over. But that wasn't always the case, because sometimes you would get your ass kicked a lot in dungeons. And then the more you get your ass kicked, the more you have to rest to heal yourself.
Yep.
The more you have to do that, the more you're burning time, and then it's very difficult to keep up with these very, very strict time demands that people place on you in order to get these quests done. Now, of course, in the later game, you get stronger and you get access to a lot more utility things that make this much easier. Fine. Fair enough. But at the same time, it's the early game that literally everybody has to go through. And so you should try to design your early game to be approachable. Start with minimal challenges first, just enough to introduce somebody to the game.
Yeah.
Then you ramp things up from there. And you can have like a peak difficulty be very, very high. Absolutely. Because so long as you put it far enough into the game. And especially for an RPG. Because RPGs are all about like customizing yourself, and if you want to have something be extremely difficult, but it's, you know, halfway through the game, well, I can be like, all right, this is halfway through the game, I can take time to prepare myself right now. When it's at the very beginning of the game and like the very first quests that you can possibly do are
like this,
like kicking your ass over and over again, that is naturally just going to turn people off to your game, and it's kind of a dick move. Honestly, it's like slapping somebody in the face for being like, imagine if like you write a book and then you give it to somebody to read and they're like, oh cool, I'm really interested in reading this book, and then you just slap them in the face for that, and they're like, what was that for? Why would you do that? That doesn't make any sense. And you're like, if you want to read this book, you have to learn how to dodge slaps. I know you can do it. It's possible for you to learn how to dodge slaps. And it's like, okay, like, yes, I probably could do it. I could probably develop this skill set. But why is your game that important that I'm willing to devote a significant amount of my time to developing this unique skill set?
Yeah.
It strikes me as kind of an arrogant attitude to have about your game.
Yeah.
So yeah. What else to say about Daggerfall? Daggerfall Unity is better, I think, than Daggerfall. It does feel a lot more approachable in a lot of ways. Highly recommend, if anybody wants to give Daggerfall a try, don't play the original game, play Daggerfall Unity. Daggerfall Unity also fixes a lot of bugs. It is not bug-free by any stretch of the imagination. I ran into plenty of bugs in the 8 hours that I played it, but Daggerfall Unity is certainly a better way to experience the game. And I do kind of think that had Galen been playing Daggerfall Unity, I think we would have finished out that series, actually. Even with the annoying game design that did exist.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I really hated the dungeons. It felt like such a crawler to me. I just like I couldn't do it. But maybe I don't know.
Well,
Maybe.
I think you would have had a lot more tolerance for frustration, though, because um, just like there's a lot of like quality of life things about Daggerfall Unity that are better, um, and I think it's easier to make a stronger character in Daggerfall Unity. Maybe I'm wrong about that, um, but yeah. Ultimately, our verdict for Daggerfall Unity is DNF. Did not finish it.
Yep.
And that's sad because it means that the quality of the game was such that we did not choose to see that game through to the end.
Do better, Todd Howard.
Yeah.
Next.
Actually, that was the first Elder Scrolls game that Todd Howard worked on. He was not a lead, but he was on the team by that point.
Yeah. Yeah, he
Um,
was.
so yeah, that's all we've got to say about Daggerfall. Daggerfall. It's unfortunately, I think it's going to go down as my least favorite Elder Scrolls game, in spite of all the good that it did for the series as a whole.
Yep.
As a game, it's frustrating. And if that is the main reaction that I have to your game, it's not a very good game in my eyes. But after Daggerfall, we led into Morrowind. So,
Yes, sir.
what were you thinking about Morrowind going into it? Because, I mean, up to that point, we'd played through Arena, we'd played through 8 hours of Daggerfall, we had experienced two games that are wildly different from Skyrim. Um, what was it that you were kind of thinking that and expecting about Morrowind going into it?
I was expecting it to feel a lot more like, Skyrim. From the screenshots alone, knowing that it was more open world and actually had that classic feel to it that I was used to. So it did deliver on that for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't say I was surprised by how it was set up and what we went into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think Morrowind is sort of the first game in the series that, and I know this is kind of a very backwards way to look at it, like chronologically backwards, but Morrowind is to me the first game in the series that has the essential Elder Scrolls DNA. It has sort of the same DNA that the future games would refine and evolve into the present form in Skyrim,
Yeah.
and hopefully soon the future form in Elder Scrolls 6. Um, Hopefully sooner than August of 2029. Um, I think, by the way, we've just recently, or if Elder Scrolls 6 comes out after 2026 or 2027, then it will have been longer between Skyrim and Elder Scrolls 6 than it was between Daggerfall and Skyrim. So,
Yep, it will.
yeah, that's
Which is
interesting.
wild to think about,
Um,
considering the graphics difference.
yeah. So Morrowind is a really interesting game. I think Morrowind toned down a lot of the brutal difficulty of Daggerfall. I think it ditched a lot of the Morrowind ditched a lot of the more onerous aspects of gameplay that Daggerfall had, and that Arena had some as well. I don't know of any timed quests that we came across in Morrowind. Did you find any? Because I don't think I did.
No, I didn't find any either.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, there was the timed quest of Blood Moon,
Timed quest of
where
Blood Moon?
you had to rescue somebody before. Oh, I forget exactly what it was. It was towards the end of it. I don't remember, but
In like the maze that you're going through.
no, it was like you had to get back to so and so in time in order not to like. It was part of like the East Empire Company things.
Oh, yeah, okay. No, you're right. You're right. I do remember that. Yeah, okay. But that is the only timed quest I think I can think of for the
That's the only one I think of.
entire game. Now,
Yeah.
granted, I think we played a vast minority of all of the quests that are in that game. So,
Available? Yeah, for sure.
yeah. We did miss out, I think, on quite a bit of content. I'm not sorry about that, though. So, on the topic of side quests overall, this has kind of been a problem for all three of the first games. All three of the first three games in the Elder Scrolls series. I think that none of the first three games really have great side quests. At least, certainly none of the ones that we came across. And in my opinion, I think that changes in Oblivion. So for Oblivion, I actively encourage you, Galen, to seek out and do all of the side quests, because I think you're going to enjoy them a lot more than you did in Morrowind. But yeah, so the problem with Arena was that all of the side quests were essentially like the Radiant quests in Skyrim, right? Where like you go up to Delvin Mallory and he's like, "Oh, I got this this house over here I need you to break into. Think you're meant for the job?" And then, like, he doesn't actually voice any specifics about it or anything, because it's just like, we're gonna pick a random house in this random area and we're gonna, have you go steal these random items. And it feels very cheap. It feels less cheap in Skyrim because it's like you've exhausted everything else by that point. Once you get around to that, like, you've exhausted everything. In Arena, it's just like, well, we've got the main quest, and then fine, I guess if you're gonna have something else to do, go do this. Like crappy 2-minute long side quest that like gives you nothing of value. It's like, why am I even bothering? Well, I didn't, and you barely did.
Right.
Daggerfall is the first game in the series to introduce guilds.
Yes.
And I was really looking forward to the guilds in Daggerfall. Really, I wanted to join the Mages Guild and maybe a couple other ones, and just go through and enjoy everything that they had to offer. My understanding, though, is that there isn't really much of a story in fact, there's no real story for the guilds in Daggerfall. It's just constant fetch quests until you get up to whatever maximum rank you can get to in the Mages Guild. I don't even know. Let's see. Daggerfall, Mages Guild. I'm not sure that you actually can become like Archmage or anything.
Yeah. I know. I never.
Here we
I don't
go.
think I ever became.
Okay, I'm sorry. You can. Your guild rank is determined by a combination of your reputation with the Mages Guild and your 2 highest skills associated with the guild. So you can become what's called an Archmage, but it's not like in Skyrim where they're like, no, you are now the head. Like, you have advanced so far that you have mastered this guild. Like, you are now the one at the very top. So what it becomes, so the negative part of that in Skyrim is that, oh wow, I'm the new guy who comes along and I'm so amazing at everything that after a handful of quests, suddenly now I'm on top of everybody else and I get to be the leader of the new guild. Whoa!
Right.
And the upside of it, though, is that it's like, oh, okay, once I've finished out the quest line, there's something special, something very different about my standing with the guild. Something that is fundamentally different about my standing with the guild. After I finish the quest. But in Daggerfall, it's just like, well, here's a meaningless promotion.
Yeah.
What do you get by this? Well, you don't really get anything unique. In fact, I'm trying to, like, I'm looking through the wiki right now. All of the quests that you can get that level you up in the Mages Guild are all just like randomly assigned. They are basic bitch jobs. It's just something that like literally like anybody could do this, and we're from beginning to end. I will say that with Morrowind, it felt a little bit different, but there still wasn't really any kind of overarching story for the guilds in Morrowind. It was just kind of like, hey, you're going to do a favor for this person. Now you're going to do some favors for this person. Now you're going to, do this, that. Okay, now you've kind of ingratiated yourself with these people, and now you're just going to challenge the guild leader to an outright duel, and then you kill them. And now you're the head of the place. And by the way, what does this get you? Nothing really. I will say that at least with Daggerfall, there were benefits. There were real benefits to leveling up through the guild. As far as I could tell in Morrowind, the only benefits to leveling up through the guild were that you got access to more people who could do their own unique things, and it was mostly just training. And if you didn't care about 100%ing your skills for your character, then you could very easily just be like, well, I don't care about the skill that you offer training in, so fuck off, goodbye, I'm done. Like, or I mean, honestly, like, once you get a skill up to like 80, for the most part, like 70, 80, like, that's perfectly serviceable. You don't even necessarily need to do that. If you want to just abuse the mechanics that are programmed into the game, not even abuse a glitch, you can become stronger than God himself. Like, you can become literally unkillable in Morrowind. So it's very much not necessary to have a lot of people like you and be affiliated with all of your favorite guilds. You get very little out of it, except for the fact that the game, it kind of tells you, like, hey, by the way, fuck you, you're not well known enough to continue the main quest.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, okay, hold on. What do I need to be well known enough for? For the crack addict who is your mentor to respect you enough to tell you what the next job is. And it's just painfully shallow. It's not uh, it's not great. It would be one thing. It still would not be great, but it would be much better if at least the guild quests were good. But they're not. So what you wind up with is, I want to play the main quest. Okay, I'm being forced to take a break from the main quest to then go join a guild, and I get a handful of small benefits, but nothing that's too groundbreaking by joining this guild. Okay, I get some easy access to gold, I get some easy access to trainers who can improve my skills. Fine, fair enough, but there should be so much more to the guilds. With each guild in Skyrim, people complain day and night about the College of Winterhold and the Companions, and absolutely, look, I've got negative things to say about them as well. They suffered from cut content hugely. Oh, it was awful. But the Companions and the College of Winterhold had a solid story from beginning to end. It's easy to follow. It's not rife with plot holes or anything like that. None that I can think of off the top of my head, anyway. And it is a decent, coherent story that is enjoyable. At the bare minimum, if you are the most cynical person on Earth, as long as you're honestly cynical, you can admit that about Skyrim's guild quests. The same is not true of Morrowind. The guild quests in Morrowind are boring. The guilds are boring. The people are boring. I don't really care about anything in Morrowind, if I'm being honest. I did not find the rich world that I've seen so many people talk about with Morrowind. I don't want to come off as hugely negative about the game, because I think, again, it was in so many ways a huge leap forward. Everything was properly 3D. All of the world felt more solid in Morrowind than it did in either Arena or Daggerfall. I don't know. I feel like I'm going on for too long here on my own. What do you want to say about Morrowind?
I mean, for me, Morrowind was much more enjoyable than Daggerfall, obviously, but I also enjoyed it a good deal more than even Arena, just from the quality of life that it had provided. I enjoyed just being able to explore and do my own thing. I think, unfortunately, it was to the detriment of actually completing some of the quests. You know, if you put the game down for 2 weeks because you're busy and not, a 12-year-old who's in school that can play every day, all of a sudden you're not obsessed with the game necessarily, because it's not the first game you've played, and so you're no longer able to just maintain mentally where are all your quests. I mean, this is still an era of gaming where people would actually physically write down their notes and things like that, right? But I will say that doing the quests was rather frustrating. Coming back to the main quest and side quests, like there's side quests that I started that I was just like, I have no idea. I remember I started 2 weeks ago, but now I've come back to play the game and I don't even know where to start going.
Yeah.
Because not only is there no legend to tell me where to go, but then the person who told me where to go actually, either lied to me on the direction or blatantly just told me the wrong direction because they didn't actually know, which is realistic, sure, but
Right.
not enjoyable when then you can't find this thing, right? So again, part of the game, recognizing a little bit of um, you know quality of life after the fact, with just quest finding and things like that. Like I will say the game was frustrating in that aspect, but in the aspect of actually giving the player the opportunity to completely world build for themselves was definitely a wonderful step up.
Agreed. Yeah, and you mentioned, well, hey, it's realistic if somebody gives you the wrong directions. Sure, it's realistic. Lots of things are realistic. That doesn't mean that they're good to add into a game. It is realistic to have to take a shit every 5-6 hours. It doesn't mean that I really want that in the game. It's
Exactly.
realistic to have your feet get sore. That doesn't mean that I want my character to stop walking after however long and then sit
Take a
down and
rest.
complain, "Oh, my feet are so sore," and then take a rest. Like, no, I don't want that. I'm not interested
Yeah.
unless I mean, maybe things like that can exist in a certain kind of game, a game that is purpose built for that, i.e., a survival simulator. That's not what Elder Scrolls is. That's not what makes Elder Scrolls great. I don't need hyper realism or even what I'll just call inappropriate realism. I don't need
Yeah.
any level of realism that becomes a detriment to how I play the game and to how I enjoy the game.
Yeah.
If that is
Exactly.
the level of realism that you offer, I'm not interested. At least in that. I mean, I may be interested in the game overall because, like I am with Morrowind, um, because there are other aspects that outweigh the negatives. But it will be in spite of the negatives, not because of them. Um, so, what
One
what do
element
we?
about Morrowind that received particular and near universal criticism was the game's journal system.
Yeah, the
So
journal
true.
sucks. It's like barely functional, honestly. Um, okay, so what else? Let's for now. Let's focus on the positives of Morrowind. I know we kind of got off and started kind of diving deep into the negatives a lot there, but let's focus on the positives here. What did we like about Morrowind? Do you have anything?
Again, I really enjoyed the open world aspect to it. I enjoyed being able to just meet people in the world. The aspect that they got super right, I think, that they built upon in later games. Again, Skyrim as my reference. Is factions and guilds and things like that. They're great little anchors of side quests to do that actually have some intrigue to them versus like, oh, I just went and helped out a whole village by doing quests for each individual versus, oh, this is an actual guild that I can go and pursue and move up the ranks in and get some cool backstory to them and their history and yada yada yada. So I think that was a great addition to the game,
Yeah,
especially just from a questing perspective.
I think that the guilds in Morrowind overall, I guess, are better than they are in Daggerfall. Not by a lot, though.
Just the structure
I
of them, right? The actual like going,
right.
it even if you didn't have your journal beautifully set up, if you just decide I'm going to do this, this thing for a little while, it was at least your journal was coherent enough to provide
Mm.
guidance on that if stepped away from the game for a little while.
Yes. Yeah, the guilds, I think, provided the easiest, most coherent path to follow if you're looking for side content that has more structure. I will agree with
Yeah,
that, yeah. Yeah, and there is sort of a more or less defined beginning and end for the guilds as well. Um, but still, there was, well, get to the negatives later. What did I like about Morrowind? I liked that we had intentionally placed NPCs all over the world. So in Arena and Daggerfall, everybody feels like just some randomly generated character, right? Because that's essentially what they are. They're they're nobody. They're nothing. They're not people who have a purpose built place in the story. They are people, or the world. They are just people who are given a random face, a randomly generated name, um, and they're given a list of very generic things to say all the time. In
yeah,
Morrowind, uh, it was actually, I think, very different. Almost all of the NPCs, the only ones I can think of who don't follow this rule are the guards. But pretty much all the NPCs are given specific names. They're placed in very specific locations. All of the, um, well, not all of the dungeons are like handcrafted per se, but the loot is placed there deliberately. And, like everything was sort of more or less handcrafted. Um, to a lesser degree than what we see in later games, but um, the point being that everybody has a specific purpose for being who and what and where they are. And I like that. That is a big step up from Daggerfall and Arena, because we didn't have
hmm
that in the previous two games, and now, even though the world is smaller, and Morrowind is the smallest game, the smallest open world RPG that Bethesda has ever made. Um, Even though the world is smaller now, um, it feels more alive. It feels more real. It
yeah,
feels more like, hey, these are people that you're interacting with,
yeah,
rather than just these are NPCs. Hell, in Daggerfall, you couldn't even attack most of the NPCs. There
yeah,
were there were people who were cardboard cutouts that didn't move, and didn't do anything, and they just essentially acted as like interaction nodes where you could purchase services or something like that. And then there were the actors, the guards, the bandits,
yep,
the people who would actually move around, and they would attack you. Um, but yeah, like for the most part, most of the people throughout the towns were not people who you could actually,
interact with.
uh, yeah, interact with in any kind of unconventional manner. And that's not true in Morrowind. There are plenty of people who, everybody. In fact, you can pickpocket them, you can attack them and kill them, you can do all sorts of things. So yeah, Morrowind, big thumbs up on the world immersion. The immersion rating, that's definitely gone up from each of the last two games.
For sure.
Through Morrowind, at least, Bethesda has definitely sort of started to find their niche, and they're consistently improving on that factor.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
What else to like about Morrowind? I wish I could say that I liked the spells in Morrowind more. I'm a big fan of using magic in, like, because if you're given a fantasy setting, it's like, well, I could swing a sword around and like kill people, and sure, like I'm not saying that's not fun, but to me it just feels so mundane. Like it feels like a very mundane thing that I can do in real life already. Hell, I've got a sword. I got two swords right up there, just off screen. You can't see them, but they're there. I promise. Um, yeah, like if I want to swing a sword around, I can just do that. If I want to, I used to have a bow and arrow. Don't have it anymore, but I gave it away to a friend of mine. If I want to fire a bow and arrow, I can do that. I can just go do that. Hell, I can go and craft my own bow and arrow in real life. Like, that's an option that I have. Absolutely. Um, if I want to go, make my own armor, wear my own armor, like that's something that I can do. But I mean, maybe money is an object, maybe time is an object. Sure, fine, whatever. But if I want to cast magic, there is no amount of time, no amount of money, no amount of effort that I can possibly go through in the real world to be able to cast magic.
Yeah.
And so that's why I always like playing mages in video games that have magic in them. Or, I mean, like if it's a science fiction setting, like whatever the closest equivalent to a mage is, like it speaks to something within me. I like it. I didn't find the magic in Morrowind to be particularly great. It wasn't very titillating, I guess. There's something about just the way the magic feels in Skyrim. That it feels more like I am doing this, and I am the one who's, for whatever complaints people may have about certain spells being removed from future Elder Scrolls game, like there's plenty of spells that are in Morrowind that are not in Skyrim. Mark and Recall for one, Levitate for another, the Fortify skills. Yes. So, yeah, I will say spellcrafting is fun, and I know that spellcrafting is not in Skyrim. That's going to be something we'll talk about more once we get to the game that removes spellcrafting. But there is fun to be had with spellcrafting. Horribly broken, though. Horribly broken. It's way too easy to create spells that are ridiculously overpowered. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about in Morrowind? Morrowind is, I think, the first Elder Scrolls game where they kind of drop the generic feel. And there's a lot of people who think that Skyrim is very generic. I think those people are fucking nuts. I don't know what the hell they're smoking, but I want none of it. I think Morrowind is the first game in the series that really kind of establishes the franchise as being like, hey, this is no longer like generic fantasy. This is no longer something that you can confuse with any other fantasy series that's out there. This
Right.
is now something that is very idiosyncratic. It is its own thing. It's not. It is unique in a whole lot of ways. Um, so I appreciate that about Skyrim. About Skyrim. About Morrowind. Um, I appreciate the visible differences in architecture. So again, world building, the environment, from one area of Morrowind to another. Although sometimes the transition between biomes was pretty jarring. In fact, if you look at the like top right of the map, it's like, yeah, there's a straight line that runs perfectly down, where on the left side is like ash and fire, and then on the right side is just grassland. And
Right.
there's no like physical barrier or anything that would explain that. It's just no. To the
Fair.
left over there is ash, and to the right is grass. And then it's like, okay, well, I mean, that's you could have done a little bit better with this one. Um, what else do we like about?
Just a little better.
Um, each of the NPCs had more character in Morrowind than they did in previous Elder Scrolls games.
Yes, for sure. It had a lot. Again, there was a lot more depth to it than in previous games. It felt
Mm-hmm.
a little more immersive.
Yeah,
Even with the frustrating journal system, it felt way more immersive.
yeah, and that's why I don't like the wide as a mile uh, uh, and an inch deep criticism for the the later three Elder Scrolls games.
Yeah.
The of the mainline titles, I should say. Um, what else? What else is something nice that we want to? Because I want to be fair to Morrowind about this.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I mean, I feel like we've been fairly good to Morrowind. I haven't critiqued it that hard. My biggest critique was the journal system, and that's a universal critique of the game. Outside of that, it was quite enjoyable. I really did enjoy it a lot.
hmm
The quests weren't that ridiculous. They were pretty well nuanced. There's only a couple of quests that were kind of stupid with just like go get 15 of this item. It's like, all right, well that could have been cooler, but whatever. I get it. You have to flesh out the entirety of the game in some way or another. And sure, somebody programming it was like, yeah, whatever. We'll just do a couple of these in there to pepper some
yeah,
variety. Like,
yeah.
I can't fault for that.
There's a lot of fetch quests throughout Morrowind. Um,
I feel like a lot of RPGs fall into that trap of fetch quests, right? And they
yeah,
try and make it spicy so that you don't have to, so you don't think of it as a fetch quest, but that's just a RPG thing, right? And as long as they're not all fetch quests, like you
yeah,
know,
yeah. Um, I agree. Yeah, I think we never throughout the Elder Scrolls we never completely get away from fetch quests completely. Nor am I asking us to. I don't think it's necessary for us to
I don't think so either.
reinvent the game and um, I don't think that we need to completely eliminate certain tropes or anything. Um,
Yeah,
but an over reliance on fetch quests is not great. Um,
yep,
and that's kind of a lot of what Morrowind felt like for um, a lot of its quests. So yeah, let's start really diving into the negatives for Morrowind here. We've got God, where do we want to start? Let's start with the Cliff Racers. Let's talk about that. So the Cliff Racers are, in some ways, kind of my favorite thing about Morrowind, and in most ways, they're like my least favorite thing about Morrowind. The Cliff Racers are just awful, terrible mobs that exist out in the world that just constantly come to harass you, and
Yep.
it's so easy to get a large crowd of them following you because they just never stop following you, and like they can come from like all over the map. Now a big part of that is due to a bug. However, this is 2003, all right, when Morrowind released. Bethesda has had plenty of time to release a patch that would fix that. They have not.
No.
So that's annoying. There's actually a very famous. This was one of the few things that I knew about Morrowind beforehand. There's a very famous GIF of a guy playing Morrowind, and it's just him like running down one of the foyadas, and then he like turns a corner and his camera zooms out, and you see he's naked and he's being chased by like 100 cliff racers at once, and then it just stops and it says "Welcome to Morrowind." That's a fantastic GIF. Love that GIF.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, there's some problems with this. On the one hand, it led me to believe that going into Morrowind, the wilderness was going to be a very dangerous place. And I was kind of preparing for an experience where, certainly at least at low levels, the world was going to be tough, things were going to be unfair, I was going to be in like a very alien world, and and people were not going to be my friend, and I was going to have to kind of really earn my way up. And it's sort of like certain parts of that are true, but not really in any kind of meaningful way that I hoped.
Yeah.
Instead of a very dangerous world where there's tons of enemies and the world, just tries to like crush you, it's mostly just like very annoying enemies who like will get in your way, and like they'll stun you. Sometimes they'll just stun you over and over again, which is really obnoxious.
Right.
There's those enemies, and then you get the enemies where it's like you walk across one guy who is absurdly strong and he can kill you in 2 hits, and like there's just no kind of skill that you can employ to really like level the playing field or have a fighting chance. That's not really something that exists yet in the Elder Scrolls games, not through Morrowind. It's just either your stats are better than his or they aren't. But then even when your stats are better than his, that doesn't stop the other person from becoming a nuisance, which is very annoying. One last positive thing I want to say about Morrowind is the lore that it adds is absolutely fantastic. Highly recommend reading through as much of the lore that is
That's possible.
added
Yep.
by Morrowind as possible. It's great stuff. And that's something that continues to get better with each Elder Scrolls game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Including, from what I understand, ESO, that's really cool. Yeah, navigating around Morrowind is awful. People give you the wrong directions all the time, or they give very vague directions. The number of people who have tried to tell me that quest markers are terrible in Skyrim because Morrowind used to not give you quest markers, and then Morrowind would give you very specific instructions, and then those instructions would be written down in your journal. That's all fucking bullshit. Burn in hell, because that is a
Yep.
fucking lie. None of that is even sort of true. And I fully believe now that Skyrim gives you way better directions, and in fact saves better directions in your journal than Morrowind does. So yeah, suck a fucking
Yeah,
dick if you
100%.
believe
It
that,
does.
and if you're gonna try to argue that to somebody, to try to argue that quest markers are bad and they should be removed from Bethesda games, fuck off. Just fuck right off. Okay, now that I've alienated our 20 viewers,
Unsubscribe.
listen, I'm not even saying that I don't like Morrowind. Skyrim is clearly better.
No, I know.
Oh,
Yeah, but
get
again, it's
myself
just part
more.
of the hindsight is 2020. You know, like, yeah, stuff could be better.
Yep. Oh yeah, and there's
It
plenty of
was what it
room
was
for
for the
improvement
time.
in Skyrim, to be clear. But again, we're going to talk more about Skyrim's strengths and its flaws at a later time.
Indeed.
Um, hmm. Let's see what else. Um, I think I sort of said this, but I found a lot of the characters in Morrowind to be boring. Just not very interesting at all. I'd heard for a long time people talk about Caius Cosades and Vivek, and
Mm-hmm.
you really only speak to Vivek once.
Once,
Uh,
yeah.
you just talk to him once, and he's like, "Here, go grab these two things and beat the game."
Yeah.
Oh, really? Like that's it? That's all you've got to say? Like, I was
Nope.
expecting sort of a more mentorship role with Vivek. I was expecting, because I knew that Vivek was part of the game, and especially
Right.
with like how fondly some people speak of him, I was kind of expecting that he would send you. Hope that's not my car alarm. I was kind of expecting that he would send you on a number of quests that would be designed to teach you some lessons.
Right.
And
But it
I was
didn't. It really didn't.
expecting, yeah, and especially like if you go through the 36 Lessons of Vivek, the book, there's some very, very interesting writings in there. If you go on the like pilgrimages to the various shrines, a lot of them talk about how like, oh, Vivek just loves the people of Morrowind so much. He's extremely charitable. He stripped down naked and he worked this farm himself with his own bare hands. He didn't even use magic. Like that was how much he cared for the people of this.
Right.
And the whole thing with him being half Chimer, half Dunmer, that's a really cool thing too, because he's supposed to be like caught between the two worlds. Like
Yeah.
on the one hand, he accepts change. He accepts that the Chimer people have been changed into the Dunmer, and he accepts that this is the future, like this is the way now. And on
Right.
the other hand, he continually mourns the loss of the Chimeri people and the loss of Nerevar, and
Mm-hmm.
the perhaps betrayal that may or may not have happened with Nerevar. Um, and like there's just like a whole lot of really interesting philosophy that I was really expecting Vivek to kind of expose the player to over time, over the course of several quests, where he kind of acts as Yoda. And then that just didn't happen.
Yep. No,
And
he's didn't really give much of a rat's ass about it.
yeah, he doesn't even really seem to like the Nerevarine, which is strange because that's not the impression that I had gotten off of him because by what other people had said. Now, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of what I was just talking about there, yeah, I mean that's based on what other people have described about Vivek, and so I don't want to punish the game too much for other people kind of painting a false image of his role in the game.
Yeah.
But also, the false image that I had was way better than what actually was in the game. And it's mystifying to me that Vivek did not have a bigger role. Um, it's also just totally bizarre to me that halfway through the main quest, a third of the way through, whatever it is, Caius Casad's just vanishes, and then he never
Yeah.
comes back. Um, Something about that felt like a giant waste to me. Um,
It lost opportunity for sure. Like that's
yeah. Yeah, like it felt like it would have been great to have him come back towards the end of the quest and have him be like, "Hey there, player character, I'm here to tell you to holy crap, like, whoa, you have grown a lot. You've leveled up a lot. You've got fancy new armor, like, or a whole bunch of new spells or something. Like, whoa, you've got a name for yourself. Like, holy crap, like, you are actually kind of kicking ass right now. What you? Wow, maybe you don't need my help after all." Or maybe he'll still be like, "You still got a long way to go, kid," or something like that. I don't know, but like, it would have been nice to have sort of your first mentor of the game show up towards the end and kind of recognize how far you've come.
mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Um, did we talk about NPCs in the hallways? Oh boy,
That was a
yeah,
tough one.
that's awful. Um,
Yeah.
so
Better
many
than I'd
times,
expect.
yeah, NPCs in Skyrim. There's a couple differences between them and how they are in Morrowind. In Morrowind, a lot of NPCs tend to just exist somewhere. They don't have a schedule that takes them to walk around from one place to another.
Yeah.
Pretty much the only people who do are guards. Everybody else, they just exist wherever they are. So if
Mm-hmm.
you take somebody on an escort quest and then you bring them back, and then when they finish the escort quest, they're standing in the middle of a doorway, that's a real fucking pain in the ass. Especially because you can't move them, not by any conventional means.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would play Morrowind all the way through on the Xbox. That seems like an absolute nightmare to me. I
It
cannot
does.
imagine actually doing that.
I can't imagine either.
Um, Morrowind also really liked to screw you out of doing the main quest. Um, there were a
It
lot of
did.
things. There were a lot of things that you could have done that the game would just be like, "Oh, okay, well you've chosen to do this. Uh, fuck you. I'm not going to give you any warning about this, but the main quest is now inaccessible to you."
Good luck, everybody else.
Yeah, and so it's just like, fuck. God damn. Like, all right, well,
Yeah.
I guess I guess I'll play along the way that this game wants me to do things in this order, because why not? If I try to go out of order, then the game is gonna get real pissy with me.
Like
Um,
real pissy.
yeah. I kind of wonder if you can go straight to Red Mountain from level 1, and then go into the two Dwemer fortresses, get Sunder and Keening, and then just go and immediately kill Daggerfall.
hmm
Not sure if that's possible, uh, but that does kind of seem to be the only way to complete the main quest. It's not really properly completing it, but sort of complete the main quest. If you accidentally lock yourself out of the, quest line part of the main
Right.
quest.
You just
Uh,
nope. Enjoy your unfortunate time.
yeah. There also seems to be kind of a disturbing lack of reactivity, um, and particularly variance in reactivity. Given that everybody in the game has no voice acting, meaning that the effort required to add lines of dialogue to people is pretty much minimal.
Yeah.
Um, it seems very strange to me that uh, I could not say much of anything to Vivek about Almalexia. And I think I did go visit him, and like I told him about Almalexia, and he's just like, "Oh, she's dead, isn't she? This makes me sad." And it's like, can I get anything else? Like, she was your friend for thousands of years. Like,
Yeah.
surely, like, nobody knows her better than you do. Um, you know what? I just gotta say, like, I felt like the writing for Mournhold sucked. It was just all over the place and difficult to follow. Like,
hmm
there was not a cohesive thought, I think, from beginning to end of Mournhold. It's just like, we need a reason to get the player to come to Mournhold. Let's just have the Dark Brotherhood attack them, and then they can go find the Dark Brotherhood in Mournhold. Okay, why is the Dark Brotherhood attacking them? I don't know. King Helsith wanted the player character dead for some reason.
For some reason,
And it's
I
like,
don't
how
quite
would you
know
even
why.
have heard of me? Like, I've got nothing to do. There's no, and then it's like, okay, what's the reason? Oh, we thought that for some reason you were an enemy to us. I've done nothing that would possibly give you that impression. And then it just kind of hard pivots away from that to Almalexia, and it's just like, yeah, by the way, Almalexia is crazy. She wants to take, like, thearchic control of, yeah, there you
Yep.
go. I learned a word from Morrowind. Thearchic control of Mournhold, and you don't even have the choice to support her or anything. She kind of just decides, like, all right, and now I'm going to kill you, Nerevarine. which is really dumb because actually she could have just left you in the Clockwork City and you would have been stuck there, and then you would have
Exactly.
starved to death.
I thought the exact thing when I was like, really? Why are we like what?
Yep. And again, this is the kind of thing that, like, I'd had this described to me where I knew that you found Sothassil dead, and I knew that you had to fight Almalexia and kill her at some point. I thought that was going to be part of the main quest. I was very disappointed when it wasn't. And when I thought that it was going to be part of the main quest, because I thought it was going to be part of, like, sort of just the prophecy of the Nerevarine and how, like, Sothassil. So it's supposed to be like Almalexia is Fulchheimer because she's sort of in denial about the murder of Nerevar and the betrayal by the tribunal,
Right.
and then the curse by Azura. Sothassil is Fuldunmer because he is, like, racked with guilt.
Yeah.
And or at least, like, this is how it was described to me. And then Vivek is kind of straddling both worlds because he's sort of, like, the most enlightened of the three, and he's trying his best to, like, genuinely do right with his situation.
Yeah.
And so I was under the impression, first of all, that you would get to at least talk to Sothassil, and then secondly, that you would, like, form a relationship of some kind with each of the tribunal members. None of that happened, though, and that's very disappointing. And I was under the impression that, yeah, eventually, because I knew you would come across Sothassil and find him dead at some point. And I was under the impression, before having played any of this, that he had committed suicide. And then that Almalexia kind of devolved into a sort of paranoid
Some sort of
delusion.
madness.
Yeah. That was sort of the impression that I had gotten, like, hearing about this story. Again, I'm not going to blame Morrowind for me getting the wrong idea about the story. That's probably at least mostly on me. But the story that I had heard, what I had misconstrued, was way better than what we actually got. So it's kind of disappointing that the writing was not particularly strong for Morrowind.
Yeah.
I did feel it was strongest for Daggerfall, but it kind of fell apart for him at the end.
Yeah.
It didn't. The writing didn't really hold up once you actually got to Red Mountain and were faced with the end of the game. So yeah, I know a lot of people really love Daggerfall, and they're like, "Oh, he's the best villain of the series." And I gotta say, I don't understand why. Again, Skyrim was not my first Elder Scrolls game, but I think I really like Alduin as the the best written bad guy. Yeah. Okay. What else is there to cover for Morrowind?
I mean, it's kind of broken in some ways as far as being able to level, but that's par for the course for a nice Bethesda title.
Yeah. So. Well, in terms of, like, glitches that are present in the game and like sort of ways to abuse the leveling system. Yes, but with Morrowind, it was almost like it was designed to be just utterly broken,
Yeah.
because you could just buy training limitlessly. Like, there was absolutely nothing stopping you from just buying training for all of your skill ups, which is pretty much what I did. Uh,
Right.
and it's not like it's particularly hard to get money in the game. If you're focused on, making money in the game, the easiest thing that you can think of is crafting. Buy ingredients, craft them into something else, sell off the
Hmm.
product. And, you do that with potions, and then you find out, oh, hey, actually, if I close and immediately reopen this barter inventory, this person's stock of wick and marshmallow um, replenishes immediately. And then
Right.
I can sell these items back to her because I've got, however much surplus. Um, and then that permanently increases their stock of these ingredients. And it's like, oh, this is hilariously
Broken.
broken.
Yeah.
This is just infinite money within like minutes here. Now suddenly I can go around and I can talk to everybody. And then you go and you start talking to people and you're like, hey, can you train me in this? And then you realize that, oh, hey, if I can increase their disposition towards me, I have to pay a lot less to get trained by them.
Yep.
So you go around just doing that. Um, yeah, and so the intentional mechanics that are built into Morrowind are just utterly broken. Okay. What else? What else to bring up? I don't mean to be too harsh on this game, honestly, but it has to be held to a high standard. It did save Bethesda from bankruptcy, and from just becoming irrelevant.
Yep.
If it weren't for Morrowind, Bethesda would not exist today. Um,
As it is known as today.
I don't think it would exist at all. I think it would have gone the way of Interplay. So,
That's fair.
um, all right. Do you think we've spoken enough? You know what? How do you feel about the way that the franchise has evolved thus far?
Um, I think pretty nicely. I mean, obviously, we're all waiting for Elder Scrolls 6, whether or not it'll actually ever happen this decade or ever. I mean, I know they said they're working on it, so we just gotta take their word for it, right? Like,
Well, Elder Scrolls 6 is their next game that they have planned to come out. So I genuinely don't understand why people have been kind of so antsy about Elder Scrolls 6 releasing soon. I never expected that Elder Scrolls 6 was going to be releasing anytime soon. Um, because Bethesda always works on their games sequentially. They don't
yep,
they don't really do much at all parallel processing. They do like a tiny little bit, but I mean, working on Oblivion was like their only goal, and then they did DLC for Oblivion. Then after that, they moved everybody over to start working on Fallout 3. Then after Fallout
right,
3 was done, and only after it was done, they started doing the DLCs for Fallout 3. Then after that, they
right.
finally moved everybody over to Skyrim. And then, After Skyrim, it was the DLCs for Skyrim. Then after Skyrim, it was Fallout 4. And a lot of people like to point to the Oblivion era, where 2 years, year and a half after Oblivion came out, Fallout 3 was
Hmm.
released. But Fallout 3 was a comparatively tiny game. Physically speaking, if you're just, thinking about the map is almost the same. It's, I think, just a little bit bigger than Morrowind, and it's got a fraction of the content. Now, whether the content is the same quality, we'll wait until you get a chance to play Fallout 3 to talk about that.
Right.
Um, but uh, it's um, it's not a fair comparison to say, oh, well, Fallout 3 came out just 2 years after Oblivion. No, 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 no. Fallout 3 was a tiny, tiny game on a completely different scale than what Oblivion was. It took 5 years between Oblivion and Skyrim. It took 4 years between Skyrim and Fallout 4. And
Yeah.
then it took 8 years between Fallout 4 and Starfield. And a lot of that was marred by the coronavirus pandemic set everything back, I think, at least 2 years. I think had it not been
Yeah.
for that, Starfield probably could have released 2 years earlier, um, and it would have been the same quality that it is now. And I also think that there was a big disruption there in the transfer of Bethesda to being owned by Microsoft. Um, so that didn't help. I also think that there's probably, particularly in recent years, been some staffing changes throughout Bethesda that have um, inhibited them. I'm not confident that those staffing changes are going to be permanent. I'm not confident that they won't be either. Um, but point being, at no point did I ever expect Elder Scrolls 6 to have already released. I knew years and years ago that Starfield was going to come out first, and then it was going to be several years between Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6. I don't understand why people have been getting up in arms over that.
Yeah, and I'm not saying I'm
So,
getting up in
yeah.
arms about it. I'm just saying that I want to play it. I know it'll come out. It's been a long time, and I get it that there's other projects on their plate, so it makes sense.
Sure.
I'm not one of the people who's upset that it's not out yet. I'm just, patiently waiting.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm not trying to accuse you of anything here.
No, yeah, I know you're not.
But yeah, like there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh God, how is Elder Scrolls 6 not out yet? It's been, 13 years. It's actually just 5 days ago been 13 years since they
Yep.
released Skyrim." And it's like, well, yeah, but they've released two games in that time period, which is, roughly on track with how long it takes for them to make a game. It's a little bit longer than what they normally do, but there were some, pretty big wrenches kind of thrown into the spokes there. Like, maybe you can accuse me of being a Bethesda fanboy, uh, but you know, cut him a fucking break for like a couple things. Uh, there's been some very big hurdles for them to overcome. I'm not excusing some of the things they've done wrong, but you know there's just kind of a bandwagon there that people really like to jump on and be like, oh, Bethesda's
Certainly.
the worst developer that exists now, and blah, blah, blah. I think it's all
I wouldn't say
ridiculous.
that. That's ridiculous to say.
Yeah, well, Don't worry. There's some video essays we're going to respond to in the future. Don't worry.
Oh boy.
Oh, we're going to enjoy that. Um, yeah, I think that if I set aside my knowledge of Skyrim, the evolution of the Elder Scrolls series going from Arena to Morrowind is promising. Very, very promising. And I think it's the kind of thing where you can see radical changes from one game to the next.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in favor of that. I'm very much those kinds of changes. Maybe I don't agree with all of them, but they would excite me for the future. Um, and I think that Morrowind, like my impression of Morrowind would be that it is nowhere near what the final stage of the Elder Scrolls should be, but it is a big step forward, and it makes me hopeful for the future.
Definitely.
In spite of all the frustrations I've had with this game. Um, yeah, I would say that of the 3 Elder Scrolls games we've played, or partially played, so far, Morrowind would have to be my favorite. Um, it is the one that overall I think provides the best experience so far.
Definitely. Definitely. I'd agree.
But
So far.
so far, but there are 2 more Elder Scrolls games so far that we still have to play. And the next one up is Oblivion. So, um, hopefully, by the time this comes out, we will have found some time, some way, somehow to start recording episodes of Fallout 3. If you've noticed that instead of an alternating schedule recently, we've been so normally what we would do is like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Morrowind, Tuesday, Thursday, Fallout 2, and then the next week Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Fallout 2, Tuesday, Thursday, Morrowind. It's just been Monday to Friday, Morrowind, baby. It's been back to back to back to back to back nonstop.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's because we've been having some trouble finding some time to record Fallout 3. Um, I do not want to record on PC because Fallout 3 is notoriously broken for PC, and I want to avoid that experience. Unfortunately, uh, Xbox has shut down the Xbox 360 store, which means that you cannot buy Fallout 3 or so you don't have to buy Fallout 3 to play it on Xbox, but you wouldn't be able to buy any of the DLC. So you wouldn't be able to play any of the
Mm-hmm.
DLC. And I think we could do that, but that doesn't feel right to me. So I actually own Fallout 3 and all of its DLC on my Xbox. And because I already own it, that means I can download it. Because I can download it, that means that we can play it. So we need to find some way, somehow, for us to be able to record in person. And that can be at Galen's place, that can be here at mine, but there are commuting times to work out there and other logistical issues, let's say.
Hurdles.
There's hurdles. Hurdles the turtles.
Exactly.
So yeah, hopefully by the time this comes out, which will be At
Oh, he
least
died.
December 17th. Um, hopefully by that time we've found some way to start recording episodes of Fallout 3. And then after this comes out, this will take the place of the next Elder Scrolls episode to release. So after this, whether that's December 18th or further afield, the next Elder Scrolls episode to come out is going to be Oblivion. And that is one that I have been looking forward to since we started this series. Actually, yeah, even though my favorite game of this series, spoiler alert, is Skyrim, I remember starting this series, was it a year and a half ago? That sounds about right.
Roughly, yep.
And my biggest desire was to play Oblivion. I wasn't really interested in Arena. Wasn't super interested in Daggerfall. I I knew there were going to be headaches associated with those games. I did want to get through Morrowind because that was the last one that was going to be new to me. Um, from here on out, I've played Elder Scrolls before. Uh, Galen has not played Oblivion. He has played Skyrim. And to be clear, I'm still going to play Oblivion because I want to play Oblivion. um, yeah, so that's what we're looking forward to. Up next is Oblivion,
Up next. Next
and
time on Dragon Ball Z.
that's
Wait,
right.
what? What are we playing?
Next time on Dragon Ball Z, his name was Morrowind, a proud video game entry. Um, yeah. Do you have any final thoughts? Any parting words, Galen?
No, I'm looking forward to playing Oblivion when we get to it. It's gonna be fun.
Sounds good, man. All right. Thank you, everybody, so much for watching. I do hope that you've really enjoyed this. Hey, make sure to drink plenty of water. This thing is almost empty because I have drained it over the last 3 hours that we've been recording for. Go out, do something nice for somebody, and as always, take it easy. Goodbye.
Take care.